Hello MUS 2020 students. This is going to be a really big video on a really fun topic, using audio effects in live. I've got a basic clip loaded that I'm going to use to demo these. Here's what it sounds like. And it just loops over and over. I'm not going to get into a ton of specifics on all of these effects because there's just way too much to go over with. So if you have really technical questions, remember you can always use the info view to get hints about what a particular knob in an effect does. And if that's not enough, go to the Help menu and read the live manual. Under Live Audio Effects reference, you will find every effect in live described in excruciating detail. Let's get started. To apply an effect, just grab it and drop it onto the track that you're going to use it on. We'll start with Autofilter. Autofilter emulates a variety of different filter modules. You can click on the circuit type to change what they are. They're all slightly different, but work on the same idea. A filter blocks out sound that's not desirable. The name of the filter corresponds to how it works. Currently, it's set to low pass, so anything that is lower than the filter frequency will pass through. Everything above that is attenuated out. High pass does the opposite. Anything that's above the filter frequency goes through, anything below is cut out. Bandpass lets some frequencies through on either side, but cuts out everything else. Notch inverts the idea of a bandpass so that frequencies around the cutoff are filtered out. And finally, the Morph filter adds an extra knob that allows you to switch between all other filter modes. With all of these, you use the frequency knob to set where they kick in, and use the res knob to set how strongly they affect frequencies near that cutoff frequency. There's also a low frequency oscillator, or LFO, that allows you to sweep the cutoff frequency up and down from where it's set. To use it, set the shape, by default sine wave, the amount, and then the rate. And you can get a pretty good sweep. You can set the rate either in hertz or you can sync it to the tempo. Here's what that sounds like. Pretty cool. Auto pan is an effect that's best heard through your headphones. Basically, it automatically moves things to the left or the right output. You set the amount that it will affect the audio signal. Let's do 100%. Set the rate, which is how fast it will process, either in hertz or you can tempo sync. You can use the phase knob to adjust the offset between the two signals, and the shape knob to change the shape of the selected waves. And here's what that sounds like. Again, this is best heard through headphones. Beat repeat adds synced repeats at an interval set with the interval knob. This point can be further shifted by using the offset knob. Each slice is then repeated, but the grid knob can make the slices much smaller or larger and made to fluctuate with the variation knob. Chance sets the percentage that a repeat will occur. If it's 100%, it's always going to repeat. Pitch and pitch decay allow you to change the pitch of the output signal. The output modes allow you to output either a mix of the two, go to insert mode, which mutes the original during repetitions, or gate, which only outputs the repetitions. Moving on, chorus is a classic effect. This is the classic effect that makes it sound like a group of people is playing the same thing all at once. You can use the two delay time sliders to get more complex time and phasing between the two, then set the rate for the speed of the chorus effect and the amount to control how long the modulation takes place. Feedback controls the percentage of the signal that's looped back into chorus's input, and dry-wet lets you adjust the amount between the dry or unprocessed signal and the wet or processed signal. Dry-wet will have the same function in every other device we look at from this point on. This XY pad labeled modulation is something really useful to get a handle on. This allows me to control two things simultaneously. On the Y-axis, I'm controlling the amount of chorus that's applied. On the X-axis, I control the rate or speed of the chorus. So, using this, I can sweep it around and control two parameters simultaneously. You'll see an XY pad on a lot of other devices as well. Again, it's a really cool thing to get your hands on and use to experiment. Next is the compressor. The compressor squishes the dynamic ceiling of the input signal so that then when you add expanded gain in the dry-wet signal using makeup or different output settings, it makes everything perceptibly louder. It works by setting a threshold at which the compression turns on and then a ratio. The ratio controls the ratio of input to output. So, for a ratio of 3:1, for every 3 decibels of input over the threshold, the output only increases by 1 decibel. The gain slider controls how much additional volume is added after compression takes place. Please do not abuse this device. Ear fatigue is very annoying and very real. I know that it sounds like louder is better. That's not necessarily true. so you can hear it making things considerably louder. Again, please just be aware ear fatigue is real. It doesn't have to be super loud all the time. EQ3 is a 3-band equalizer based on a DJ mixer. Similar to autofilter, you set a high and low frequency cutoff and then adjust the gain, boost, or cut knobs for the low, mid, and high frequency bands. You can also cut them out entirely using the L, M, and H enable buttons. This can dramatically change the sound of a signal by removing higher spectral content or lower fundamental content from a signal. Erosion is a signal degrader. You select the type, noise, white noise, or sine, give it a frequency, width, and amount, and let it modulate the input. Lower frequencies tend to be much more pronounced when using this particular device. And again, you'll notice that the device is controlled with an XY controller. Flanger is the 70s classic. Basically, you're creating phasing by using time-modulated delays that are set with the delay time. Then they feed into each other using the feedback percentage. Again, both of these are controlled using the XY pad. So this is a really great way to set it so you can get the best possible sound. It also has the same LFO found in the autofilter, allowing you to modulate the delay time exactly the same as the filter frequency is modulated in the autofilter. This goes really well in conjunction with the chorus effect as well. In fact, on many guitar pedals, you can find a single chorus flanger pedal that will take the place of both of these effects. Gate is a really underused plugin and potentially a very useful one. The way that it works is that you set a threshold, and if the incoming audio signal is quieter than that, it stays silent. If it's at or above the threshold, it goes through. It's super useful for getting rid of quiet background noise that's only heard when no one is talking, or for triggering reverb effects on drums, Phil Collins style. Can also be used for creating some interesting stuttering effects. Grain delay works by granulating the incoming signal. Not to get too technical, but this is splitting it into small chunks, usually below 20 milliseconds, that are then processed. To To use the XY controller, you select a parameter for the Y-axis and the X-axis. Once those are set, you can then use the controller to control the amounts of either. This one, you really just need to try and see what you get. There's way too much involved to get into in this video. If you're interested, check out Curtis Rhodes' book Microsound, which goes into insane levels of detail explaining how granulation works. It's about 425 pages, but it is a really good read. Super cool. This one you can have a lot of fun with. The limiter is really simple. It sets the absolute volume ceiling of your audio signal in the ceiling box. Currently, it's set to -0.3 dB. This means that nothing will go above that level. It will always be 0.3 dB below unity. This is really useful if you're afraid that you're getting too loud. This one in particular is a default that I usually put on the master channel. You can use the gain knob to boost or cut volume before limiting takes place, but it will never exceed whatever you set in ceiling. Again, really useful for keeping things from clipping and distorting due to excessive volume, and it should generally be placed on the master channel if you have any doubts. So at this point, I've got it turned up to add 24 decibels to the incoming signal, but it still is not exceeding that ceiling. I can check by looking at the output of the track, which is -0.3, and at the output on my master channel, -0.3. This is still pretty excessively loud, so I don't recommend doing this all the time. It's usually a better idea to mix instead. Looper is basically your classic guitar loop pedal. You set how long it records in the record box. Currently, it's set to variable length. I'm just going to do 1 bar. Then, you set what happens after it records using the then box. Currently, it's set to overdub. So, if I change that, I can get it to play or overdub. Plus is overdub, triangle is play. Then you hit the record button to record, hit it again to change to overdub or play mode. You can also hit the record, overdub, play, and stop buttons for manual control. Phaser creates sweeping effects by creating notches in the frequency spectrum. You set how many notches there are using the Poles knob, then use the XY controller to set frequency and feedback positions. Again, it really helps to use the XY controller here, although if you know specific frequency or feedback percentages, you can input them directly. You can also change the mode between Earth and space. Try it to really hear the difference. It's kind of hard to describe. The LFO is the same as on the flanger and autofilter and affects the frequency here in the phaser. Classic 70s sound. Pingpong Delay is a delay line whose output jumps between the left and the right outputs. It has the ability to sync to the tempo of the song, in which case you use the numbers to set the number of 16th notes in the delay, or by hertz. The F button freezes the delay and keeps it from changing until freeze is turned off. This can be really cool. No pun intended. Speaking of the 70s and making things old school, Redux is how to do it. This will make it old school by down sampling your audio to make it sound like it's coming from an NES, an Atari 2600, or any other old school video game by only playing for every X number of samples. Contrary to popular terminology, this bit reduction does not do that. It actually reduces the amplitude or volume of each sample, which is why it's disabled by default. Very cool. You can take even the most standard classical cello and give it just a little bit of crunch. Reverb, what can I say? It's reverb. Take it all the way from a cathedral sound down to a plate in terms of the echo diffusion and make those audio clips sound like they're in a real space. The decay time knob controls how long the reverb goes. Density moves from thin to thick echoes. Scale controls if the echoes are light or dark. I really recommend turning on Hot Swap and just using the presets, which are arranged by hall, room, others, or special. You can get some really interesting things using those. But you can also use the reverb settings yourself and create the perfect space. Still though, it's really hard to get it just right. Start with a preset that's close to what you want and tweak that instead. Saturator is a wave shaper. If any of you are Eurorack users, you're probably familiar with this. Basically, you select the type of curve you want to apply to the audio signal and adjust that with the drive knob. Beware that this can get really loud and distorted. You'll want to use the output knob to reduce volume if needed. What you're doing is you're forcing the wave into the characteristics of the wave that you select in Saturator. This can have a profound effect on the sound of a very simple signal, or it can take a really complex signal and add massive amounts of feedback and distortion to it. Be careful, and again, ride your output knob when you're playing with it. Also, there are more parameters like drive, curve, depth, linear or exponential, and damping and periodicity. So this one has quite a few things you can do with it. Simple delay is a pair of delay lines, one on the left channel and one on the right. You can set them up to sync with the tempo, in which case you use the number to set the number of 16th notes in the delay, or in hertz. The link button will link both channels to the same delay time that you set on the left channel. You can use feedback to adjust the amount of feedback that will be sent out of the simple delay and back into its own input. Dry wet, of course, adjusts the balance between the unprocessed and the processed sample. With Reverb, simple delay is one of the default devices that is put on the return tracks. In fact, in every default setting for Ableton Live, whenever you create a new session, you will have Reverb on return track A and simple delay on return track B. They're always there, and you can always use the send knobs to change them. Tuner is a tuner. You can use this to tune a guitar or any other instrument that you put into Ableton Live on an audio track. It's very, very useful, just telling you how in tune you are or not. You can see that my cello is mostly in tune, but the vibrato is drifting a little bit. Finally, there is utility. It's a very, very versatile plugin for analysis, adjusting gain, pan, or stereo width. You can also invert the phase of the left or right channel, or sum to mono, or bass low frequencies below a cutoff to mono. This can be very useful if you run into serious issues with phasing or with mud just kind of occurring sonically in specific frequency bands. It's not one that you'll really have to use though, but I thought I'd let you know what it is just so you have an understanding. But that's it for the built-in effects in Ableton Live.